Maya Washington stepped off the city bus and looked up at the tall glass building in front of her. First National Bank had been serving the downtown area for over 50 years, and today she was finally going to open her business account here. She adjusted the straps of her old backpack and walked through the heavy glass doors. The bank lobby was busy with the usual Tuesday afternoon crowd. Office workers cashed their paychecks while elderly customers waited in line for the tellers. Maya looked around and noticed the marble floors and expensive artwork on the walls. Everything screamed money and success, which made her feel a bit out of place in her simple jeans and sneakers. She had dressed casually on purpose today. After years of wearing military uniforms, she loved the freedom of comfortable clothes. Her friends always told her she looked younger than her 22 years, especially when she wasn't in formal business attire. Today, she probably looked like any college student running errands. Maya joined the line for the tellers, pulling out her phone to double-check the wire transfer instructions. Her lawyer had sent them yesterday along with the settlement check that was now safely tucked in her backpack. $847,000. It still felt surreal to her. The money came from a government settlement after her military service ended differently than planned. She couldn't talk about the details, but the compensation would let her start the cybersecurity business she had always dreamed of. Today was supposed to be the beginning of her new life as a civilian entrepreneur. "Next customer, please," called out the teller at window 3. Maya walked up to the counter where a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled blonde hair was waiting. The name tag read, Janet Morrison. Janet smiled politely, but Maya noticed her eyes quickly scan her casual appearance. "Good afternoon." "How can I help you today?" Janet asked. "Hi, I need to deposit this check and set up some wire transfers," Maya said, pulling out the cashier's check and placing it on the counter. Janet picked up the check and her expression immediately changed. Her eyes went wide as she read the amount, then looked back at Maya with obvious confusion. "This is for $847,000, Janet said slowly, as if Maya might not know the amount. "Yes, that's correct," Maya replied calmly. She had expected some surprise at the large amount. Janet turned the check over several times, examining it closely. "And you're the payee, Maya Washington?" "That's me." Maya handed over her driver's license and military ID. "I also have my social security card and a passport if you need additional identification." But Janet wasn't looking at the IDs. She was staring at Maya with growing suspicion. "Can I ask where this check came from?" Maya had prepared for this question. "It's a settlement payment from the government. My lawyer can provide documentation if needed." "A settlement?" Janet's voice had a sharp edge now. "What kind of settlement?" "A legal matter that's been resolved," Maya answered, keeping her tone professional. She understood that large deposits required some verification, but Janet's attitude was starting to feel less like standard procedure and more like accusation. Janet set the check down and looked around nervously. "I'm going to need to get my supervisor for this transaction. Please wait here." Maya watched as Janet walked quickly to a man standing near the loan officer desks. He was Asian, probably in his 40s, wearing an expensive suit and a concerned expression as Janet whispered urgently in his ear. Both of them kept glancing back at Maya. The supervisor, whose name tag identified him as Robert Chen, walked over with Janet. He picked up the check and examined it even more thoroughly than Janet had. "Miss Washington, I'm Robert Chen, assistant manager. This is quite a large deposit. Can you tell me more about the source of these funds?" Maya explained again about the government settlement, offering to provide her lawyer's contact information. But Robert seemed more interested in studying her appearance than listening to her explanation. "You're very young to be handling this amount of money," he said finally. "I'm 22, Maya replied, "and I've been managing my own finances since I was 18. Robert and Janet exchanged another look. Maya could feel other customers starting to stare as the conversation continued at the counter. She was beginning to feel uncomfortable with all the attention. "We're going to need to verify this with our manager," Robert said. "Would you mind having a seat in our private office while we process this?" It wasn't really a request. Robert was already walking toward a small glass office at the side of the lobby, clearly expecting Maya to follow. She gathered her documents and walked behind him, aware that every eye in the bank was now watching her. The office was tiny with just a desk, 2 chairs, and a view of the main lobby through glass walls. Robert gestured for her to sit down. "Someone will be with you shortly," he said, then left and closed the door. Maya sat alone in the fishbowl office, watching through the glass as Robert and Janet had an animated conversation with a tall white man in his 50s. This had to be the manager. He was listening intently, occasionally looking in her direction with a stern expression. She pulled out her phone and texted her lawyer. "Having some issues at the bank with the deposit. They seem suspicious about the check. Is this normal?" Her lawyer responded quickly. "Unfortunately, yes. Large cash transactions often trigger extra scrutiny. Be patient and cooperative. The check is legitimate and will clear verification." 20 minutes passed. Maya watched as other customers completed their transactions and left. She saw the 3 bank employees continue their discussion, now joined by a security guard. Their body language was tense and they kept gesturing toward her office. Finally, the manager approached her office. He was the imposing man with graying hair and cold blue eyes. His name tag read, "William Stevens, Branch Manager." "Miss Washington, I'm William Stevens. I understand you're trying to deposit a very large check today." "Yes, sir. I provided all the necessary identification and can give you my lawyer's contact information for verification." Stevens sat down across from her, studying her face intently. "This check is for nearly $1 million. That's more money than most people see in a lifetime." "I understand it's a large amount," Maya said, "but it's a legitimate payment and I have all the proper documentation." "You say it's from the government?" "Yes, a settlement payment." Stevens leaned back in his chair. "Miss Washington, I've been in banking for 20 years. I've seen a lot of fraudulent checks, money laundering schemes, and various financial crimes. When someone your age walks in here with a check this size, wearing jeans and sneakers, it raises red flags." Maya felt a chill run down her spine. This was no longer about verifying a large deposit. This was about her age, her clothes, and probably her race. "Sir, I understand your caution, but I've provided proper identification. The check is from a legitimate government settlement. I'm happy to wait while you verify it through proper channels." "Oh, we're definitely going to verify it," Stevens said with a cold smile. "We're going to verify it very thoroughly." He stood up and left the office, closing the door behind him. Maya watched as he walked directly to his desk and picked up his phone. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but his expression was grim and determined. Something was very wrong. Maya had a sinking feeling that Stevens wasn't calling the bank's verification department. The way he kept looking at her while talking suggested he was reporting her to someone else entirely. She checked her phone again. No new messages from her lawyer. She was completely alone in this situation, trapped in a glass office while 3 bank employees treated her like a criminal for the crime of being young and black with a large check. Maya took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. She had faced much worse situations than this during her military service. Whatever Stevens was planning, she would handle it with dignity and professionalism. But deep down, she knew this was about to get much worse before it got better. Stevens walked back to his office with purpose, closing the door behind him. He pulled out his business card holder and found the small white card tucked behind his business cards. It had been there for 3 years, given to him during a banking security seminar. The card simply read FBI Financial Crimes Unit with a phone number. He had never used it before, but today felt different. Everything about this situation screamed trouble to him. A young woman, barely out of her teens, walking into his bank with a check for nearly $1 million. Wearing jeans and sneakers like she was going to the grocery store. It didn't add up. Stevens picked up his phone and dialed the number. After 2 rings, a professional voice answered. "FBI Financial Crimes Unit, Agent Rodriguez speaking. This is William Stevens, branch manager at First National Bank downtown. I need to report a suspicious transaction in progress." "Go ahead, Mr. Stevens." Stevens lowered his voice and turned his chair away from the glass wall. "I have an individual here attempting to deposit what I believe is a fraudulent cashier's check for $847,000. Can you describe the individual and the circumstances? She's a young African-American female, early 20s, very casually dressed. Claims the money is from some kind of government settlement. The whole thing feels wrong. Someone her age doesn't just walk around with that kind of money. Agent Rodriguez was typing on his computer. Has she provided identification? She has IDs, but these days those can be faked easily. I'm telling you, something is not right here. She's been evasive about the details of this so-called settlement. We'll send agents to investigate. Keep her there, but don't let her know you've contacted us. Act like you're processing her transaction normally. Understood. How long until someone arrives? 20 to 30 minutes. We'll have agents Martinez and Thompson respond. Stevens hung up, feeling satisfied. In his mind, he had just prevented a major financial crime. He walked back out to the lobby where Janet and Robert were still whispering near the teller stations. Everything's under control, he told them quietly. Just keep an eye on her and act normal. Help other customers. Do your regular work. Someone will be here soon to handle this properly. Robert nodded nervously. Should we tell the security guard? No need to involve anyone else yet. This will be resolved soon enough. Back in the glass office, Maya was growing more concerned by the minute. She could see Stevens talking to his staff, and their body language told her everything she needed to know. They weren't trying to verify her check through normal banking channels. They thought she was some kind of criminal. She pulled out her phone and called her lawyer's office. The receptionist put her through immediately. Maya, how are things going at the bank? Her lawyer asked. Not well. They're acting like I'm trying to rob the place. The manager has made it clear he thinks the check is fraudulent. That's unfortunate, but not uncommon. These large settlements sometimes trigger excessive caution. Are they processing the verification? I don't think so. They've had me sitting in this office for almost an hour now. I think they might be calling some kind of authorities. Her lawyer was quiet for a moment. Maya, the check is completely legitimate. You have all the proper documentation. If they want to involve law enforcement to verify it, that's their right. But you haven't done anything wrong. I know that, but this feels different. Like they've already decided I'm guilty of something. Stay calm and cooperative. Don't leave until they either process your transaction or officially ask you to leave. You have every right to be there, conducting legitimate business. Maya hung up and looked around the lobby again. New customers had come and gone while she sat trapped in this office. An elderly man was making a large cash withdrawal without any problems. A young white man about her age had deposited what looked like a substantial check and was already walking out the door with a smile and a handshake from Janet. The difference in treatment was obvious and painful. Maya had served her country with honor, been wounded in the line of duty, and was now trying to start a business that would employ other veterans. But all the bank staff saw was a young black woman who didn't belong in their world of expensive suits and marble floors. 30 minutes after Stevens made his call, 2 people in dark suits entered the bank. Maya watched through the glass as Stevens immediately approached them, shaking hands and gesturing toward her office. The woman was Latina, probably in her 30s, with short black hair and a no-nonsense expression. The man was African-American, tall and athletic, with graying temples that suggested he was the senior partner. They spoke with Stevens for several minutes, while Maya sat under their observation like a zoo animal. She could see Stevens pointing at her and making animated gestures as he told his version of events. The agents listened carefully, occasionally nodding or asking questions. Finally, the 2 agents walked toward her office. Maya straightened up in her chair and tried to project confidence despite the butterflies in her stomach. The female agent knocked on the glass door and entered without waiting for permission. Miss Washington, I'm Agent Martinez and this is Agent Thompson. We're with the FBI. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your transaction today. Maya's heart sank. Stevens had actually called the FBI on her. Of course, I'm happy to cooperate with any questions you have. Agent Thompson sat down across from her while Martinez remained standing by the door. The bank manager has reported some concerns about a large check you're trying to deposit. Can you tell us about it? It's a cashier's check for $847,000 from a government settlement. I have all the documentation and proper identification. What kind of settlement? Martinez asked. Maya hesitated. She couldn't discuss the classified details of her military service. It's related to my time in the military. My lawyer handled all the negotiations. Thompson leaned forward. You were in the military? Yes, sir. Army. I served for 4 years before my discharge. The agents exchanged a glance that Maya couldn't read. Thompson continued. Can you provide your military identification? Maya pulled out her military ID and handed it over. Thompson studied it carefully, then showed it to Martinez. They both looked at the ID, then at Maya, then back at the ID. What was your military occupation? Martinez asked. Intelligence specialist, Maya replied. Thompson was still staring at her ID. Miss Washington, what unit were you assigned to? Maya gave him her unit designation, watching as his expression began to change. He was reading her ID more carefully now, paying attention to details that Stevens had completely ignored. Agent Martinez, Thompson said quietly. Could you step outside with me for a moment? The two agents left Maya alone in the office again. Through the glass, she could see them having an intense conversation. Thompson was holding her military ID and pointing at specific details. Martinez's expression was changing from professional skepticism to something that looked like surprise. Stevens approached the agents, clearly eager to hear their assessment, but instead of the confirmation he expected, both agents seemed to be questioning him. Their voices were getting louder and Stevens was starting to look defensive. Maya couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could see Thompson pointing at her ID and then at Stevens. Martinez was shaking her head and looking frustrated. Stevens was gesturing wildly, clearly trying to justify his actions. Other customers in the bank were starting to notice the commotion. Janet and Robert were watching nervously from behind the teller counter. The security guard had moved closer to the group, though he looked confused about what was happening. Agent Thompson handed Stevens Maya's military ID and said something that made the bank manager's face go pale. Stevens looked at the ID, then at Maya through the glass office, then back at the agents with growing horror. Something had changed dramatically in the last few minutes. Maya could see it in everyone's body language. The agents no longer looked like they were investigating her. They looked like they were investigating Stevens. Agent Martinez walked back to the office while Thompson continued his conversation with an increasingly uncomfortable Stevens. She knocked on the door again and entered. Miss Washington, I apologize for the confusion. Agent Thompson and I need to verify some information, but I want you to know that you're not in any trouble. Can you tell me more about your military service? Maya felt a small spark of hope. For the first time all afternoon, someone was treating her with respect instead of suspicion. I served 4 years in Army intelligence. I was deployed overseas twice and was injured during my second deployment. What was the nature of your injury? I can't discuss the specific details, but it was serious enough to end my military career. The settlement covers medical expenses and compensation for the early discharge. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Miss Washington, would you mind if Agent Thompson and I made a few phone calls to verify your service record? Of course. My lawyer also has all the documentation if you need additional verification. That won't be necessary, Martinez said with a slight smile. I think we have everything we need. She left the office again, and Maya watched as both agents stepped away from Stevens to make phone calls. Stevens was left standing alone in the middle of the lobby, looking like a man who was beginning to realize he had made a terrible mistake. Agent Thompson stepped away from the group and pulled out his phone. He dialed a secure number that connected him directly to the military personnel database. Maya watched through the glass as he spoke quietly into his phone, occasionally looking in her direction. Agent Martinez made her own call to the FBI's Financial Crimes Verification Department. She wanted to check if there were any red flags on government settlements matching Maya's description. Stevens stood nearby, trying to listen to their conversations, but both agents had moved far enough away that he couldn't hear the details. He was starting to feel uneasy about the situation, though he couldn't quite understand why. Thompson finished his call first. He walked back to Martinez with a strange expression on his face. Maya could see him whispering urgently to his partner, and Martinez's eyes went wide with surprise. "Are you absolutely certain?" Maya heard Martinez ask her partner. Thompson nodded and showed her something on his phone screen. Martinez read it carefully, then looked at Maya through the glass office with a completely different expression than before. Stevens approached them again. "Well, what did you find out? I told you something wasn't right about this whole situation." "Agent." Thompson turned to face Stevens, and his voice had taken on a sharp professional tone. "Mr. Stevens, we need to discuss your handling of this situation." "My handling? I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I reported suspicious activity to the proper authorities." "Did you verify Miss Washington's military identification when she presented it?" "She showed me some IDs, but anyone can fake those these days. Look at her, Agent Thompson. Does she look like someone who legitimately has nearly $1 million? Agent Martinez stepped closer to Stevens. "Mr. Stevens, what exactly does someone with money look like to you?" Stevens was getting flustered. "That's not what I meant. I just think it's suspicious when someone so young comes in with such a large amount." "Young people can't have money?" Thompson asked. "Of course they can, but this whole situation felt wrong." She was evasive about the settlement details. Agent Martinez pulled out a small notebook. "Mr. Stevens, did Miss Washington refuse to provide identification?" "Well, no, but did she refuse to answer your questions?" "She answered them, but she was vague about, did she become aggressive or threatening in any way?" Stevens paused. "No, she was polite, but that doesn't mean—" "So let me understand this." Thompson interrupted. "A young woman came into your bank with proper identification, a legitimate cashier's check, and answered all your questions politely. And you called the FBI because you didn't like the way she looked?" "It wasn't about how she looked," Stevens protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Agent Martinez closed her notebook. "Mr. Stevens, we're going to need to speak with Miss Washington privately. Please have your staff prepare the necessary paperwork to process her deposit immediately." "But I thought you were investigating her for fraud." "The only thing we're investigating now is whether your bank has violated this customer's civil rights." Stevens felt the blood drain from his face. "Civil rights? What are you talking about?" Thompson stepped closer to Stevens, his voice low and serious. "Mr. Stevens, do you know who Maya Washington is?" "She's some young woman trying to deposit a suspicious check. She's a decorated war hero who nearly died serving her country." Stevens stared at Thompson in confusion. "What do you mean?" Agent Martinez joined the conversation. "Miss Washington isn't just any veteran, Mr. Stevens. She's the recipient of the Bronze Star with Valor for extraordinary heroism in combat operations." "That's impossible. She's just a kid. She's 22 years old and has seen more combat than most soldiers see in their entire careers," Thompson continued. "The settlement she's depositing isn't suspicious money, Mr. Stevens. It's compensation for the injuries she sustained while saving the lives of her fellow soldiers in a classified operation." Stevens looked through the glass at Maya, who was sitting calmly in the office, checking her phone. She didn't look like his idea of a war hero. She looked like any young woman you might see at a coffee shop or college campus. "How was I supposed to know that?" Stevens asked weakly. "By treating her with the same respect you'd show any other customer," Martinez replied. "By actually looking at the military ID she provided instead of dismissing it. By following your bank's standard verification procedures instead of assuming she was a criminal." Agent Thompson pulled out his phone and showed Stevens a military commendation database entry. Miss Washington was injured when her convoy was attacked by insurgents. Despite being wounded, she maintained communication with headquarters and coordinated the rescue of 6 other soldiers. She spent 3 months in military hospitals and was medically discharged due to her injuries. Stevens read the information on Thompson's phone, his hands beginning to shake slightly. The official military record described Maya as an exemplary soldier whose quick thinking and courage under fire prevented significant loss of American lives. The settlement money, Martinez explained, covers her medical expenses, disability compensation, and recognition for the early end to what would have been a distinguished military career. Every penny is documented and legitimate. Stevens felt sick to his stomach. He had not only embarrassed himself and his bank, but he had humiliated a genuine American hero. "I had no idea," he whispered. "That's exactly the problem," Thompson said firmly. "You made assumptions based on her age and appearance instead of treating her like any other customer." Agent Martinez knocked on the glass office door and entered. Maya looked up from her phone as the agent sat down across from her. "Miss Washington, first let me apologize for this entire situation. Agent Thompson and I have verified your identity and your military service record." Maya nodded quietly. "I understand you had to do your job. Actually, we didn't have to do anything. Mr. Stevens called us based on his own assumptions and prejudices, not because of any real suspicious activity." Maya sighed. "I was afraid that might be the case." Agent Martinez leaned forward. "Miss Washington, I want you to know that Agent Thompson and I consider it an honor to meet you. Your service record is extraordinary, and what you accomplished during your deployment was truly heroic." "I was just doing my job," Maya replied modestly. "You saved 6 lives while wounded in combat. That's well beyond the call of duty." Agent Thompson entered the office and closed the door behind him. He looked directly at Maya and came to attention. "Miss Washington, on behalf of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the United States government, I want to express our gratitude for your service and sacrifice." Before Maya could respond, both agents stood at attention and rendered sharp military salutes. Maya was surprised but instinctively stood and returned their salute with the precision that had been drilled into her during her military training. The entire bank lobby fell silent. Every customer, every employee, every person in the building stopped what they were doing to watch the 2 FBI agents saluting the young woman they had come to investigate. Stevens watched in horror as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. The woman he had profiled as a potential criminal was being honored by federal agents for her heroism. Janet and Robert stared in shock from behind the teller counter. The security guard removed his hat respectfully. Several customers began to applaud, though they didn't fully understand what was happening. After the salute, Agent Thompson spoke in a voice loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. "Miss Washington, thank you for your service to our country. You are an example of the finest values of the American military." Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. After the humiliation and suspicion she had endured for the past 2 hours, this recognition meant everything to her. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That means more to me than you know." Agent Martinez turned to address the bank lobby. "Ladies and gentlemen, you are in the presence of a genuine American hero. Miss Washington is a Bronze Star recipient who was wounded while saving the lives of her fellow soldiers in combat." The applause grew louder. Several customers approached the office to shake Maya's hand and thank her for her service. An elderly man who had served in Vietnam saluted her with tears in his eyes. Stevens stood frozen in the middle of the chaos, watching his carefully ordered world collapse around him. He had called the FBI to report a suspected criminal, and instead they were honoring a war hero in his bank lobby. Agent Thompson approached Stevens one final time. "Mr. Stevens, we'll be filing a report about this incident. I strongly suggest you and your staff receive training on proper customer service and bias awareness." "What happens now?" Stevens asked. "Now you're going to process Miss Washington's legitimate transaction with the respect and professionalism she should have received from the beginning," Martinez replied. "And you're going to hope she doesn't decide to file a discrimination complaint against your bank." Stevens looked at Maya, who was still surrounded by grateful customers. She had handled the entire situation with grace and dignity, never losing her composure even when treated like a criminal. For the first time in his 20-year banking career, William Stevens realized that his prejudices had not only embarrassed him professionally, but had caused him to disrespect someone who had literally bled for his freedom. The weight of that realization was crushing. The applause in the bank lobby gradually died down as customers returned to their business, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Maya found herself surrounded by people who wanted to thank her for her service, shake her hand, and hear about her experiences. She graciously accepted their gratitude while keeping the details of her military service appropriately vague. Agent Martinez approached Stevens, who was standing near his office looking pale and shaken. "Mr. Stevens, we need to discuss the serious implications of what happened here today. I understand I made a mistake," Stevens said quietly, glancing around to make sure other customers couldn't hear him. "This wasn't just a mistake," Agent Thompson joined them. "You wasted federal resources by calling the FBI on a legitimate customer conducting legal business. You profiled a war hero based on her appearance and age, and you potentially violated several banking regulations in the process." Stevens felt his throat go dry. Violated regulations? Banks are required to treat all customers fairly regardless of race, age, or appearance, Martinez explained. You failed to follow standard verification procedures and instead jumped to conclusions based on prejudice. Agent Thompson pulled out his phone. "I'm required to file a report about this incident with both the FBI and the banking regulatory authorities. Your bank could face serious penalties." "Penalties?" Stevens's voice cracked slightly. "Civil rights violations in financial institutions are taken very seriously," Martinez said. "The Department of Justice has specific guidelines about discriminatory practices in banking." Stevens looked across the lobby at Maya, who was still talking with customers and appeared remarkably composed, considering what she had endured. "What can I do to fix this?" "That's not up to us," Thompson replied. "That's up to Miss Washington and your corporate headquarters." Meanwhile, Maya had finished speaking with the customers and walked back to the glass office, where her documents were still scattered on the desk. Agent Martinez followed her. "Miss Washington, I want to personally apologize again for this entire situation. You were treated shamefully today." Maya looked around the bank lobby, where employees were now staring at her with very different expressions than before. "Agent Martinez, can I ask you something?" "Of course. How often does this happen? People calling law enforcement on customers who don't fit their expectations?" Martinez sighed. "More often than it should. Usually it's store managers calling about shoplifting suspects. But we see cases in banks, restaurants, hotels. Basically, anywhere that people make assumptions about who belongs and who doesn't. And do those calls usually turn out like this?" "Honestly? No. Most of the time the people being reported haven't done anything wrong, but they don't have military service records to change everyone's perspective. They just get humiliated and sent away." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I figured." Agent Thompson approached them. "Miss Washington, we're going to need to leave soon, but I wanted to give you my card. If you experience any retaliation or further problems from this bank, please contact me immediately." Retaliation? Sometimes when institutions are embarrassed like this, they try to blame the victim or make things worse. We'll be monitoring the situation. Maya took the card and put it in her wallet. "Thank you both. I know you were just responding to a call, but the way you handled things once you learned the truth means a lot to me." The agents shook her hand and left the bank, but not before Agent Thompson had another brief conversation with Stevens. Maya couldn't hear what was said, but Stevens looked even more uncomfortable afterward. Once the FBI agents were gone, Stevens slowly approached Maya. The confident, dismissive man from earlier was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely shaken. "Miss Washington, I owe you a tremendous apology." Maya looked at him calmly. "Yes, you do. I made terrible assumptions about you, and I'm deeply sorry. There's no excuse for how you were treated today. Mr. Stevens, can I ask you something honestly?" "Of course. If I had walked in here wearing an expensive business suit instead of jeans, would you have called the FBI?" Stevens opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He knew the honest answer, and it made him feel sick. "If I had been a young white woman with the same check, same story, same casual clothes, would you have called the FBI?" Again, Stevens couldn't bring himself to answer, but his silence was answer enough. Maya continued, "I've been dealing with people making assumptions about me my entire life, but today was different. Today, those assumptions cost me hours of humiliation and could have seriously damaged my reputation if those agents hadn't been professional enough to check the facts." "You're absolutely right," Stevens said quietly. "I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I'm ashamed of my behavior. Mr. Stevens, I appreciate your apology, but I need to tell you something else. I didn't come here today just to deposit this check. Stevens looked confused. What do you mean? I came here to establish a relationship with this bank. I'm starting a cybersecurity consulting company, and I was planning to make this my primary business bank. The blood drained from Stevens's face again. A consulting company? Yes. I specialize in helping businesses protect themselves from cyber threats. My lawyer estimates the company will generate between $5 and $15 million in revenue in the first 3 years. Stevens felt dizzy. 15 million? The business account would have brought substantial deposits, regular wire transfers, and banking fees to this branch. I was also planning to recommend this bank to other veteran-owned businesses in my network. Miss Washington, please, I'm sure we can work something out. Let me process your deposit right now and we can discuss setting up your business accounts. Maya shook her head. Mr. Stevens, after what happened today, do you really think I want to do business with this bank? Stevens realized he was watching millions of dollars in potential business walk out the door because of his prejudice. Please give us another chance. I'll personally ensure you receive the highest level of service. The highest level of service should be standard for every customer, not something special you offer after you've been caught discriminating. Maya began gathering her documents from the desk. I'll be taking my business elsewhere. Miss Washington, wait, let me call my regional manager. I'm sure we can make this right. Make it right? Maya turned to face him directly. Mr. Stevens, you called the FBI on me. You treated me like a criminal for 2 hours. You embarrassed me in front of your entire lobby. How exactly do you plan to make that right? Stevens had no answer. The damage was done and he knew it. Maya walked to the teller window where Janet was standing. Janet looked nervous and apologetic. Miss Washington, I'm so sorry about the confusion earlier. If you'd like to complete your deposit, I can help you, right now. Thank you, Janet, but I've decided to bank elsewhere. Janet's face fell. She had been working on commission, and losing a deposit this large would significantly impact her monthly earnings. Robert approached them, looking equally worried. Miss Washington, as assistant manager, I want to apologize for my part in this situation. We mishandled your transaction badly. You certainly did, Maya agreed. Is there anything we can do to convince you to give us another chance? Maya looked around the bank lobby one more time. Other customers were still watching the situation unfold, and several employees were clearly anxious about the outcome. Robert, can I ask you something? When I walked in here today, what was your first thought? Robert hesitated. I thought you were very young to be handling such a large transaction. And what made you think that was suspicious rather than impressive? Robert couldn't answer honestly without admitting his own bias. Maya nodded. That's what I thought. She walked toward the bank's exit, then turned back one final time. Mr. Stevens, I hope what happened today teaches you and your staff something important. You never know who's going to walk through your doors. That young person you're suspicious of might be a war hero. That casually dressed customer might be a successful business owner. That person who doesn't look like your typical client might have more money than anyone else in your lobby. Stevens watched helplessly as Maya pushed open the glass doors and walked out of his bank forever, taking her settlement money and her future business with her. Within minutes of Maya's departure, Stevens's phone rang. It was his regional manager. Bill, I just got a very concerning call from the FBI about an incident at your branch today. We need to talk immediately. Stevens closed his eyes and realized his nightmare was just beginning. The next morning, Maya walked into Community Trust Bank, across the street from First National. The difference in atmosphere was immediately noticeable. The lobby was modern and welcoming, with diverse staff and customers that reflected the real world outside. Good morning. Welcome to Community Trust, said the receptionist, a friendly woman in her 30s. How can we help you today? I'd like to open personal and business accounts, and I have a large deposit to make, Maya replied. Wonderful. Let me connect you with our relationship manager, Ms. Patricia Holmes. Within minutes, Maya was sitting in a comfortable office with Patricia, who listened attentively as Maya explained her needs. When Maya presented the same cashier's check that had caused such drama the day before, Patricia simply nodded and began the standard verification process. This should take about 20 minutes to verify through our system, Patricia said professionally. While we wait, let me tell you about our business banking services for veteran-owned companies. No suspicious looks, no assumptions, no FBI calls, just professional banking service. Meanwhile, at First National Bank, Stevens was having the worst day of his career. His regional manager, David Kim, had driven down from corporate headquarters and was now sitting across from Stevens's desk with a thick folder of documents. "Bill, let me make sure I understand this correctly," David said, his voice ice cold. "You called the FBI on a Bronze Star recipient because you thought she looked suspicious?" "David, I know it sounds bad, but it doesn't just sound bad, Bill. It is bad. Catastrophically bad." David opened the folder and pulled out several printouts. The FBI filed an official report about yesterday's incident. They specifically noted that the customer provided proper identification, answered all questions cooperatively, and showed no signs of criminal activity. Stevens felt his stomach drop. "What does that mean for the bank?" "It means we're under investigation by 3 different federal agencies. The OFI, see if the Comptroller of the Currency wants to review our discrimination policies. The Department of Justice is looking into civil rights violations, and the FBI has flagged us for wasting federal resources." 3 agencies? Stevens' voice was barely a whisper. David pulled out more papers. "It gets worse. Miss Washington's lawyer contacted us this morning. They're not filing a lawsuit yet, but they want a formal apology and assurance that this won't happen to other customers. I can write an apology letter right away." "Bill, you don't understand. This isn't about a letter. Our legal department estimates this incident could cost the bank between $2 and $5 million in regulatory fines, legal fees, and reputation damage." Stevens felt the room spinning. $5 million? And that's not counting the business we lost. Miss Washington took her deposit to Community Trust Bank. But it wasn't just the $800,000 deposit, Bill. She was planning to open business accounts for a cybersecurity company. David pulled out another document. "Our business development team did some research on Miss Washington after you called this mess in. Her company is projected to handle $15 million in contracts over the next 3 years. All of that banking business is now going to our competitor." The weight of his mistake was crushing Stevens. He had not only humiliated a war hero, but he had cost his bank millions of dollars and created a regulatory nightmare. "David, I've been with this bank for 20 years. I've never had a problem like this before." "That's exactly the issue, Bill. In 20 years, you never learned to check your assumptions about people. Yesterday's incident isn't an isolated mistake. It's the result of 20 years of unconscious bias that finally caught up with you." David stood up from his chair. "The bank's board of directors met in emergency session this morning. They've made their decision." Stevens knew what was coming, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. "You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out after we finish this conversation." "David, please. I have a mortgage, kids in college. I made one mistake." "You didn't make one mistake, Bill. You made dozens of small mistakes that led to one huge disaster. Every time you judged a customer by their appearance instead of their character. Every time you treated someone differently because they didn't fit your expectations. Yesterday was just the day it finally backfired spectacularly." Stevens thought about all the young customers he had been suspicious of over the years. The casually dressed entrepreneurs he had dismissed. The people of color he had subjected to extra scrutiny. Had he been discriminating all along without realizing it? "What about Janet and Robert?" Stevens asked weakly. "They're being transferred to other branches and required to complete bias training. They followed your lead, but they didn't make the call to the FBI. That was your decision alone." 30 minutes later, Stevens walked out of First National Bank carrying a small box of personal items. Security had escorted him through the lobby where he had worked for 2 decades. Several customers stared as he made his humiliating exit. Janet and Robert watched from behind the teller counter, both pale and shaken. They knew their own jobs were hanging by a thread, and they would never look at customers the same way again. Across the street at Community Trust Bank, Maya was finishing her account setup. Patricia had processed everything efficiently and professionally, treating Maya exactly the way every bank customer should be treated. "Miss Washington, your accounts are now active and your deposit has been processed," Patricia said with a genuine smile. "Welcome to Community Trust Bank." "Thank you, Patricia. This has been a completely different experience from what I dealt with yesterday. I heard about what happened at First National. I'm sorry you had to go through that. We believe in treating every customer with respect regardless of their age, appearance, or background." Maya appreciated the sentiment, but she had learned not to take such promises at face value. "I hope that's always true, but I'll be watching to make sure." 3 weeks later, Maya was in her new office space putting the finishing touches on her cybersecurity company's website. Her business was already growing faster than she had expected. Word about her military background and expertise had spread through the veteran business community, and contracts were starting to come in. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Maya, you have visitors. 2 FBI agents want to see you." Maya smiled. She recognized Agents Martinez and Thompson as they walked into her office. "Miss Washington, we wanted to stop by and see how you're doing," Martinez said. "I'm doing well, thanks to both of you. My business is getting off the ground nicely." Thompson looked around the modern office space. "This is impressive. How many employees do you have now?" "5 full-time and 3 part-time contractors, all veterans. I'm planning to double that by the end of the year." Martinez nodded approvingly. "We also wanted to update you on the situation at First National Bank. I heard that Stevens was fired." "He was, and the bank has implemented new training programs for all employees. They've also hired a diversity consultant to review their policies." Thompson added, "We've been using your case as a training example for our agents. It's a perfect illustration of how assumptions and prejudice can lead to completely wrong conclusions." Maya was honored that her experience was being used to educate others. "I hope it helps prevent other people from going through what I did." "It already has," Martinez said. "We've had 3 cases in the past month where agents asked better questions and avoided similar mistakes." After the agents left, Maya returned to her computer and pulled up First National Bank's website. She had been curious about what happened to the bank after her experience there. The bank's homepage now featured a prominent statement about their commitment to diversity and inclusion. They had hired a new branch manager and were advertising their cultural sensitivity training program. Maya noticed that their stock price had dropped 15% in the weeks following the incident. Several news outlets had covered the story, and the bank's reputation had taken a significant hit. Her phone rang, interrupting her research. It was her lawyer. "Maya, I have some interesting news. First National Bank wants to meet with us." "What do they want?" "They want to make a formal apology and discuss how they can make amends for what happened. They're also asking if you would consider being a consultant to help them improve their customer service training." Maya thought about it for a moment. Stevens was gone, and the bank seemed genuinely committed to change. Maybe some good could come from her terrible experience. "Set up the meeting," she said, "but make it clear that I'm not interested in their money. If they want to make amends, they need to prove they're serious about treating all customers fairly." 6 months later, Maya's company had grown to 15 employees and was handling cybersecurity for major corporations across 3 states. She had also become a speaker at banking industry conferences, sharing her story and helping financial institutions recognize and eliminate discriminatory practices. Stevens had never found another job in banking. His termination for civil rights violations had made him unemployable in the financial industry. He had taken a job as a night security guard at a warehouse, a dramatic fall from his former position as a bank manager. Maya occasionally drove past First National Bank on her way to client meetings. The new branch manager was a young black woman who had implemented policies ensuring that every customer received respectful treatment regardless of their appearance. The glass office where Maya had been held like a suspected criminal now had a small plaque that reminded employees of their commitment to equal treatment for all customers. Maya's story had become a powerful reminder that respect and dignity should never be dependent on how someone looks or how old they are. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly, and everyone has the potential to surprise you if you give them the chance. The young woman who had been profiled as a potential criminal was now a successful business owner, employing other veterans and contributing to her community. Her experience had taught an entire industry about the cost of prejudice and the value of treating every person with the respect they deserve.